that there's no evidence as yet that ivermectin is effective in these spaces because no one's trialing it, because there's no money in it, because science is a subset of big pharma and the economic imperatives that right everything. No one's doing experiments into natural immunity because natural immunity is not profitable. No one's doing those experiments are not being underwritten. There's no clinical trials for that because no one wants that data for vitamin D or for steroids or for all of the things that came out as ultimately effective once the profits have been gleaned. And then how can you expect to maintain the authority? How can you expect to sit behind those logos of CNN and MSNBC and claim that kind of piety and certainty? And the way that they were like outraged by it was astonishing, like a kind of a how dare you have this credibility? How dare people listen to you? And I think that it's precisely because of a willingness to listen one day to a left-wing person, a right-wing person, some people with some crazy theories, some people talking about Egypt, some people talking about MMA. That's how people are now. People don't want that kind of centralized authority. It's over because of the way that technology has afforded people access to a variety of news sources, and a counter-narrative for any story can emerge almost at the same speed as a narrative. So now the price of authority is legitimacy. Authority has to be legit. And you can't, like, the same way as they did that horsewormer stuff with you, like if you watch Biden in Poland, he said, like, this speech is along the lines of, Putin thought that Ukraine would roll over. Putin didn't know how brave Ukrainian people are. He is a tyrant. And of course, Ukrainian people are brave. Of course, it's disgusting that there's suffering under this military invasion. But there's, like, I could handle it, I think, if the president went, listen, we were involved in that coup in 2014. The kind of, even the sort of people that are, the diplomats that are involved in this are the same diplomats that are involved in stuff like Iraq and Afghanistan. BlackRock are going to profit subsequently from the rebuild of Ukraine. Russia have got their agenda. We've got our agenda. We believe our agenda is more in line with what most American citizens will benefit. But they can't actually say that because it isn't true, because that what they want is a unipolar hegemonic world, in the same way that CNN don't even consider that what they're saying is dangerous and harmful. And now we're at a point where it's sort of that their approach to it may have been counterproductive in the most basic medical ways, and they weren't able to have that conversation because of financial imperatives and because they're basically owned.
Well, they're a propaganda network. Yeah. I mean, that's really all they are. They're just a propaganda network. And I used to think they were the news, and I think at one point in time they were the news. And I think somewhere along the line, when pharmaceutical drug companies started spending so much money, I mean, you've seen all those clips, brought to you by Pfizer, Anderson Cooper, brought to you by Pfizer. There is no way they can be honest. There's no way. If you're accepting money from the very people that you now have to hold criminally liable, and they have been criminally liable. I mean, they have the highest criminal fines of any companies ever for crimes like what they've done, lies, covering up evidence, and they just pay a fine and go back to work. And that's what's wild about it. If you killed 60,000 people with your company, and your company, whatever your company made, your company makes peanut butter, and that peanut butter killed 60,000 people, they'd be like, you got to stop making peanut butter.
It's delicious.
Yeah, but with the drug companies, they're like, oh, your experimental drug where you lied about all the tests killed 60,000 people. Well, we're going to need a small portion of the money that you made as a fine, like Vioxx. I forget what the actual numbers were, but it's something along the lines of Vioxx made somewhere around $12 billion. It killed somewhere between 50 and 60,000 people, and they had to pay somewhere in the range of $5 billion in fines. Now, don't quote me on the numbers, but it's pretty close to that. That's wild. Yes. Because that means you are allowed to profit, essentially profit $7 billion and kill 50,000 plus people. That's okay, and you can still go to work.
Yeah, that's a pretty extreme ideology to underwrite a system, and it's the kind of ideology that in the end is going to lose credibility, because when you do replace it for something like peanut butter, it makes it jars with us. We recognize, oh yeah, we are just permitting that. Another thing that was extraordinary is the sudden authority that we were willing to grant to these corporations that had been like the baddies up until 20 minutes before.
Exactly.
We know what Pfizer had done. We know the out-of-court settlements. We know what Johnson & Johnson had done with the alleged carcinogens in baby powder. I mean, stories that sound like they're out of a Bill Hicks joke, actually happening in reality. I heard this thing that guy, Pavlov of the dogs, like he did other experimentation, the results of which were that 20% of people are highly susceptible to hypnosis and similarly highly susceptible to placebos. Like 20% of people, if you give them placebos, it will be effective under the right conditions or whatever, and the same with hypnosis. And 20% of people will not be hypnotized and will not respond to placebos. The middle 60% is where propaganda operates. How many of that middle 60% can you persuade? And I was just astonished that authoritarianism could suddenly be repackaged in this manner. That authoritarianism could tell you that war is a good thing. That authoritarianism can tell you that big pharma is a good thing. That being locked in your home is a good thing. And also all the pieces of evidence sort of fell away from it. Oh no, natural immunity is effective. Oh no, there are adverse events. Oh, there are cases of myocarditis. Oh no, there are like every single bit of masks aren't working. All of it just started to fall apart, and somehow they're expecting the eligibility of their authority to have maintained in spite of everything, the edifice cracking open.
And it's so convenient that of all the remedies, that only the ones that are controlled by pharmaceutical companies are the ones that get highlighted. And one of the best pieces of evidence for that is vitamin D. And there was a recent study, see if you can find this. There was a recent study that estimated somewhere in the range of 70% of all hospitalizations and deaths from COVID could have been prevented with vitamin D. I don't know if that's true. Yeah. But I remember reading that article going, that is the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. And when did they know that this was true? Because if they just started handing out vitamin D, it's readily available, so easy to get, so easy to make, so cheap. They just handed out vitamin D to everybody. How many deaths could they